This is going to be the Unit 7-2 notes and homework for area of circles for 7th grade. So it says the area A of a circle equals the product of pi and the square of the radius r. Really fancy way of saying, hey, this is the formula that we are going to use to solve for area. Several of these things we've already talked about before. Pi is 3.14, just a number that I'm always going to give to you guys. Like it's never going to change. We will always use pi whenever we're dealing with circles. R is the radius. The radius goes halfway across the circle. Now, the only thing on here that we haven't really talked too much about yet is this part right here. This is what's called a square, meaning that whatever the radius is, we're going to multiply it times itself. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump into some of the examples on here. So example 1 says determine the area of the circle. Use 3.14 for pi, which we will always do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite our formula. We have area equals pi r squared. We already have our radius right here. There's nothing to go find. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in a 5 right here. And we have to square that because that's what this 2 means. And then our number for pi is just 3.14. Multiply those two. So now I'm just going to work it out piece by piece. 5 squared, because I don't have to worry about the order. 5 squared is 25, because 5 times 5 is 25. Now I have to multiply that times 3.14. Obviously, I can't do with it like this, so I've got to set it up properly first. So off to the side, I'm going to do 3.14 times 25. 4 times 5 is 20. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 more is 7. 5 times 3 is 15. Make sure you have your placeholder. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 1 is 2. And 2 times 3 is 6. Now I just have to add all the way across. 0, 7, 14, 15, 8, and 7. And I've got 2 decimal places, so my number comes out to 78.50, or just 78.5. So the area of the circle is approximately, I'll do this in a different color this time, 78.5. So what we just found was the entire area of the circle. And just to clarify what area is everything on the inside of this circle. So that number that we got, that 78.5, is actually 78.5, I'm going to put this little marker, 78.5 centimeters squared, because we're talking about everything on the inside of that circle. And that's for the whole circle. So for right now, I'm actually going to skip example 2, but we are going to come back to it. I want to tackle these problems first. So for the exercise, it says determine the area of each circle. Use 3.14 for pi. I hate this 22 over 7 for lots of reasons, but it may come in handy eventually. But for right now, don't use it. It says round to the nearest tenth, so 1 decimal place. So on number 1, on every one of these, we are using the same formula. The area of the circle is going to be pi r squared. We already have our radius right here. So I'm going to plug in my 7 squared right here, because again, that's what that is. And I'm going to multiply times pi, 3.14 times that 7 squared. When I square the 7, I get 49, because 7 times 7 is 49. And we are still doing this times 3.14. Now, before I can get the final answer, I've got to work this over off to the side because I don't have enough room right here. So I'm going to do 3.14 times 49. 4 times 9 is 36. And then 9 plus 3 more is going to be 12. And 3 times 9 is 27, plus 1 more is 28. Put my placeholder there. I'm going to do this in a different color just so you can see a little bit better. 4 times 4 is 16. Carry the 1. 5, and then 12 here. Now I add straight across the bottom. So I have 6, 8, what's that, 13, 5, and 1, plus my 2 decimal places. So 153.86. So the area of my circle, and I'm going to do this to the nearest tenth, would be 153.86, and that's inches squared. Because it says round to the nearest tenths place, this technically rounds to 153.9 inches squared. On to the next one. So on number 2, what makes this one a little more trouble is that they're giving us the diameter all the way across. So it's 25 millimeters all the way across. I only need halfway across. So to find the radius, I can do 25 divided by 2. Half of 25 is going to be 12.5. So now I have a radius that I can work with. Formula's the same thing. Area equals pi r squared. I'm going to take my radius. I'm going to do 12.5 squared. And I've got to multiply that times 3.14. This is part of one of the rough parts about being in 7th grade. Come STAR test time, you guys will have to be able to do a lot of this by hand, which I know that a lot of you can, but for today's purposes, we're gonna cheat a little bit and we're gonna use the calculator on some of these. So for 12.5 squared, that's 12.5 times 12.5, and you get 156.25. And then we still have to multiply that by 3.14. And when I multiply both of these, I'm going to get 490.6, because I'm rounding to the nearest tenth. So that'll be 490.6 millimeters squared. On to example 3. Same thing, except this time we don't have to go through and figure out the radius. They give us the radius right here. So same formula. Area equals pi r squared. We know our radius, which is 12, so I'm going to do 12 squared. And I have to multiply that times pi. Hopefully you know this one already, but if you don't know your times tables, this part could be rough. But 12 times 12 is 144. And then we still got to multiply that times 3.14. So triple-digit multiplication. That's some rough stuff. I do want you to go ahead and attempt it just to be on the safe side, just because it's been a while since some of you guys have done this. So I'm going to do it off to the side. So I've got 144, and I'm going to multiply it times 3.14. So 4 times 4 is 16. Carry the 1. Still 16, plus 1 more is 17. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 more is 5. I'm going to change the color each time I do a new row. So I've got my placeholder here. Then 1 times 4 is 4. Times 4 is still a 4, and then a 1. Now I'm going to change colors again. I've got my 2 placeholders. 3 times 4 is 12. Carry the 1. 3 times 4 is still 12, plus 1 more is 13. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 more is 4. Now I've got to go through and I've got to add all of these up. So I've got my 6 here. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Carry the 1. 9, 10, we got 12, 3, 4, 5, and 4. Plus I've got my 2 decimal places. So because you need to be able to know how to do that, and I wanted you to see it, our area of our circle is going to be 452, and we got to round to the nearest tenth, so it's going to be 0.2 feet squared on this one. Okay, now I'm going to go back to example 2, because this box right here, we haven't talked too much about it. So this is the formula for area of a semicircle, or half of a circle, is A equals 1/2 pi r squared, and the formula for the area of a quarter circle is A equals 1/4 pi r squared. Pretty much any circle that we are going to deal with, think about it as a whole circle cut into 4 parts. A semicircle is going to be half of the circle, so it would be just those 2 parts. If I wanted a quarter of a circle, well, if I still got it cut into 4 parts, I'm only going to want 1/4. So for the one up here, for the one on the top side, I would take my answer, I would divide it by 2. For the one on the bottom, I would take my answer and I would divide it by 4. So now let's go through example 2. It says determine the area of a semicircle that has a diameter of 9.4 millimeters. Use 3.14 for pi, round to the nearest tenth. So right here it tells us that we're doing a semicircle. That's just half of a circle, meaning that our final answer we have to divide by 2. If you're comfortable with these formulas, you may use them, but to me it makes more sense just to go ahead and divide by 2 when we're finished. So I'm going to use the same formula as before. I'm going to use area equals pi r squared. First thing I need is my radius. So my radius, well, they didn't give me a radius this time around. They gave me a diameter. So radius is going to be half of that. So I've got to take that 9.4 and cut it in half. So I do 9.4 divided by 2, I get 4.7. So again, just for my folks that I know aren't listening and they're just watching the video, 9.4 divided by 2 gives me that 4.7. So now I'm ready, and I can go through and I can start plugging in stuff. Pi has not changed since we started, still 3.14. We're going to do that times 4.7, but that 4.7 squared. This is where numbers start to get pretty rough. So what we're going to do is we're going to cheat, and we're going to use a calculator this time around. This 4.7 squared is 4.7 times 4.7. So whenever you multiply those two, you get 22.09. Oop, except I wrote the wrong number there. There we go. And I still have to multiply that times a 3.14. Again, this is now 4-digit and 3-digit multiplication. This is some pretty rough stuff. So I'm going to do that times 3.14 because I'm cheating and using a calculator. And on this one, I get, let's see, 69.3626. This is why you have to have your rounding skills. We are going to do this to the nearest tenths place. So our answer will be 69.4. And I already forgot what kind of numbers we're working with. We are dealing with millimeters. So that would be 69.4 millimeters squared. Now I'm ready to go through and tackle these other problems down here on the bottom. So for number 4, I'm going to take my final answer. I've got to divide it by 2. Number 5, final answer is going to be divided by 2 because it's a semicircle. On number 6, they only give me a quarter of a circle. So my final answer will have to be divided by 4. So some rough handwriting. There we go. So final answer divided by 4. Start with number 4. Here's my formula. We're going to do area equals pi r squared. First thing I need my radius. Well, on this one, I know it's half of a circle, but this goes all the way across the circle. So my radius is only half of that 28. So I'm going to take that 28, I'm going to cut it in half, and I get 14. So 14 squared. Then pi is still 3.14. Multiply these two. So I'm going to go ahead and work this out right here. So I do 14 squared, so 14 times 14 comes out to 196. And we do that times 3.14. And multiply these two. I get 615.44. Now, because this is a semicircle, it's only half of the circle, I have to divide my final answer by 2. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and divide by 2. And I get 307.7. Technically 0.72, but rounding to the nearest tenth. And I already forgot what our units were. Meters. So this is going to be meters squared. Now to the next one. All right, so number 5, again, semicircle. The formula is the same. So it's area equals pi r squared. Our radius, this time around, you gotta be really careful. This little squiggly mark here means that they are doing just half of the circle and that our radius is going to be 3. So we're gonna do pi r squared, so 3.14 times 3 squared. That's a really lousy times sign. So 3 times 3 gives me 9. And I'm going to do that times 3.14. And now I got to multiply these two. And I get 28.26. Here's the problem with this. Again, this is a semicircle, only half of that circle. So I'm going to take my final answer. I'm going to divide it by 2. And I get 14.13. Well, I'm going to do 14.1 because, again, we're rounding to 1 decimal place. That will be feet squared. Final one on the notes. All right, number 6. Same formula. A equals pi r squared. You got to kind of picture the entire circle here. Because of that 6.4 that they give us, we're actually dealing with the radius here because it only goes halfway across a full circle. So my radius is still 6.4. We have to multiply that times itself or square it. And we're going to have to do 3.14 times that 6.4 squared. So now I'm going to do it piece by piece. So I'm going to do 6.4 times 6.4 because I'm squaring this. And I get 40.96. And I still have to multiply that times the 3.14. So now these two, I'm going to do that times 3.14. I get a big old honking number. I get 128.6. Actually, I'm going to leave it at 0.6 because it goes on for a little bit and it rounds nicely to 6. So final step. Again, this is a quarter of a circle. We only have 1/4 of it. So to show that 1/4, I'm going to take my final answer. I'm going to divide it by 4. When I divide this by 4, I get 32.2. That's going to be 32.2 feet squared. I'm going to talk a little bit about the homework, but for the most part, you guys are on your own after this. If you have any questions, make sure that you are asking as you go, and I want to help you guys out. Make sure you're using your notes on this section, but what I will tell you is that you're going to use the same formula on all of these. So use these formulas. Make sure you know whether you're dealing with the radius or the diameter. So like here, this is the radius. Looking at these other ones real quick. On number 2, they give us the diameter. Number 3, diameter. Number 4, diameter. 5 and 6, obviously the radius, but make sure that you watch out for the diameter on 7 and 8. Keep in mind that for the diameter, the radius is going to be half of what they give you. On these last 2, 9 and 10, same formula, but when you get done, your final answer on number 9, because you're talking about a semicircle, is half. On number 10, you're talking about a quarter section, so your final answer is going to be divided by 4 when you get finished. If you have any questions, guys, please ask. I'll do everything I can to help you out on this section.